Fire has been at the heart of some of our most destructive disasters, changing lives forever. One tinder-dry summer, hell comes to earth as communities fight for their very existence against an unforgiving firestorm. Summer 2003. Vacationers in the province of British Columbia on Canada's west coast are taking advantage of hot, sunny summer days. In fact, 2003 is already one of the hottest, driest years on record. Good news for the tourist town of Kelowna in Okanagan Mountain Provincial Park.
Kelowna is a city of about 100,000 people, and it's known as a retirement haven, but also the job market is pretty good, so you've got young people coming out here for the recreational lifestyle.
Most residents agree that Kelowna is the gem of the Okanagan, and nowhere is this more true than in the Mission subdivision, an area on the south perimeter that features some of the city's most luxurious homes. One of them belongs to retired geologist Murray Road and his family.
Well, it was modest, but it was still a bit upscale. We had only been living there for a year and a half. It was our dream home.
Not far away, the retirement home of Edgar Fenwick hugs the shores of Okanagan Lake.
It was built to take advantage of the shoreline, so it sort of wraps around the shoreline. It's quite long. It took me about 2.5 years to build this house.
The Fenwicks and the Rhodes, like many Kelowna residents, are keeping a watchful eye on the forests that surround them. Drought conditions are double the normal levels by July. North of Kelowna, in British Columbia's east-central interior, is an area known as the North Thompson Valley. It includes the towns of McClure, Lewis Creek, and Barriere. Much of the lumber harvested in the North Thompson Valley is processed in the small town of Lewis Creek, 56 kilometers north of Kamloops. The majority of Lewis Creek's residents are employed at the sawmill. Rob Rutten owns an antique store on property adjacent to the sawmill. Once a general store, it is now a thriving business and popular tourist attraction.
It was one business that I was in that every morning when I got out of bed, I was anxious to go and open the doors, and I look forward to every day.
Rob Rutten cannot know that the daily routine he loves so much is about to change. Residents of BC's interior are used to hearing about forest fires in the summer. On average, there are over 1,800 fires each year. But at the end of July in 2003, the beginning of the forest fire season, there are already more than 800. The increase in the number of fires has not escaped the attention of Kelowna's fire chief, Jerry Zimmerman.
It was such a dry, hot summer with very little moisture. And that was the main thing that put us at risk.
While lightning is the main cause of forest fires, many fires are also started by humans. Wednesday, July 30th, 2003. In the tiny town of McClure, just south of Lewis Creek, resident Mike Bearer extinguishes a cigarette at the foot of a forested mountain.
Thought he'd extinguished it, but it didn't go out. He went for help immediately. By the time help came, it was out of control.
In just 24 hours, a small brush fire started by a cigarette becomes a full-blown forest fire.
By Wednesday evening, the Forest Service was all over it. They had 7 bombers and 3 helicopters working.
BC's forest services are stretched even further as the number of fires continues to grow. The next morning, 16 fires are reported, including one on the slopes of Okanagan Mountain, 20 kilometers south of Kelowna. The fire on Okanagan Mountain doesn't expand as much as it explodes. On a fire ranking scale of 1 to 6, this fire is a very dangerous rank 5. By the next afternoon, crown fires ignite the treetops like Roman candles.
You have a full-blown continuous crown fire that sees a wall of flame to about 2 to 3 stories high. Temperatures are in the realm of about 900 degrees Celsius.
The McClure fire is also out of control and is racing north towards Lewis Creek. Residents of Lewis Creek can see the fire's approach in the distance, but most are sure that firefighters will prevent it from reaching their community.
And it was just an absolutely incredible sight, watching these flames hundreds and hundreds of feet high and burning absolutely totally out of control.
Residents in the small town of Lewis Creek prepare for an anticipated evacuation order. But as massive fires march toward their communities, residents of Lewis Creek and Kelowna slowly become aware that their worst nightmare is about to come true. The evacuation notice Rob Rutten is expecting comes the very next day. But it's worse than he thought. He is only given 1 hour to evacuate. The fire is advancing at an incredible 80 meters per minute.
You could actually hear the fire advancing. And as we left the community, it broke over this hill, the fire itself. When a fire is at that stage, there isn't anything you can do about it but get out of its way. It decided that Lewis Creek's days were done, and it took the town.
The 3,000 residents of Lewis Creek and Barrier have been evacuated to Kamloops to wait for any news about how drastically their lives have been affected. The next day, the BC government declares a state of emergency for the entire province. But in Kelowna, for the next few days at least, the fire on Okanagan Mountain is little more than a spectacular light show, enjoyed by residents of the affluent Mission subdivision.
It looked like fireworks in the distance. It was strange. It was, you know, an explosion here and an explosion there. Oh, there's one over there. Oh, look at that.
At first, the fire heads in opposite directions, like some two-headed monster. Then, on Tuesday, August 19th, shifting winds send the firestorm on a beeline for Kelowna.
Some people reacted very intelligently and moved out their valuable furniture and so on. But a lot of them really didn't do anything. They just didn't believe that that fire would actually consume their home. I know that we were at one stage 4 or 5 kilometers away from the fire. Yet we would get embers half the size of my hand falling onto our ground.
Kelowna firefighters make their first stand as fire threatens 6 homes on the city's southwest corner.
About 6 in the morning they started to fight it, and they did fight it back on the Wednesday, and then the fire continued up and around to the east and never did touch those homes. That's when we knew we were going to have to face this thing and face it in a big manner.
The next day, another shift in the wind sends the fire directly towards the Mission subdivision. Some 30,000 residents get word to evacuate immediately, including Fire Chief Jerry Zimmerman.
That's the second largest evacuation in Canadian history.
Guy just came around yelling it was like a town crier. He went up and down the streets, get out, get out, get out. But you only have an hour.
We had helicopters, we had bombers, and you would think it should be able to be stopped. But it became apparent that it couldn't, because I would watch a helicopter go in with buckets of water and then a bomber follow in through, and it virtually wasn't doing any good.
While his neighbors leave their houses to the fire, Edgar Fenwick and his friends set pumps in the lake and run hoses up to his house. They are going to make a stand against the fire. That night, fire reaches one of the South End suburbs.
The subdivision that got hit first, Rimrock, It was a subdivision, I believe, of about 33, 34 homes. That Thursday night, we lost 15 of them. When we pulled our guys out, they said they could hear, propane tanks going up. It was a real hard pill to swallow for our guys, but that was our first big hit that Kelowna took.
The next morning, it has become very apparent that the city of Kelowna, BC is under siege. 30,000 residents have been evacuated as fire continues to assault the city's south side. While 15 homes have burned down overnight, calming winds prevent the fire from reaching Edgar Fenwick's neighborhood. But a hike to the fire line confirms that will soon change.
From that, we could see that probably what was going to happen by the afternoon, that the fire would probably feed down the gully and it would probably hit us dead on.
Edgar Fenwick and his crew spend whatever time they have left preparing for the inevitable. The city has made its preparations too. It has taken 2 days to clear a strip of land 17 kilometers long and 60 meters wide along the southern perimeter of the city. The theory is that when the fire reaches the fire guard, there will be nothing left to burn and the fire will die out. But when the rank 6 fire arrives in the late afternoon, the fire guard doesn't stand a chance.
These embers were flying ahead and igniting things ahead of them. So if you can imagine the fire's here, the wind's coming from behind it, it's tearing pieces of bark off the trees and throwing them ahead, starting fires ahead of it. That night is what the guys call hell night. The heat in the urban area was probably up to 2,000 degrees. They claimed the flames in some cases were 300 feet high. We realized that we couldn't fight this thing, we couldn't face this, so we knew we had to get them out. But the thing had actually blocked off some of the exits.
2 teams of firefighters are encircled by fire, cut off from the rest, with nowhere to go. Hell Night is living up to its name. In August 2003, it seems like most of British Columbia is burning up. Fire rages through Lewis Creek and Barriere, while 3,000 residents wait in Kamloops, not knowing whether or not they have homes to return to. In Kelowna, Edgar Fenwick and his friends have decided to risk their lives to try and save his house. And Fire Chief Jerry Zimmerman has several of his men trapped by fire.
I know there were people that thought they weren't going to make it out that night. As a matter of fact, some of our guys were actually phoning their wives and saying goodbye.
Fortunately, the stranded men are able to regroup in an open sports field that serves as a safety zone. A nearby hydrant allows them to get back into the fight.
They figured, well, we're in here and we might as well start fighting these things and putting them out. And that's exactly what they did. And it's interesting that only 4 homes were lost in that subdivision.
The next day, it is time for Edgar Fenwick and his friends to take on the firestorm. As it gets closer, second thoughts begin to run rampant in their minds.
When it did hit, what we didn't expect was the huge wind that came with it. That was horrific. With the treetops burning and the wind, it was shooting fireballs. It was like a demon. It was just like it was alive. We didn't know whether we were winning or losing for quite a while because it just kept on coming.
Still, the men hang on and gradually begin to make headway.
We kept it from burning up a lot of stuff on both sides of us. But it just diverted and swept right around. I think it was probably 3 to 4 hours afterwards that we thought we'd done it.
Kelowna fire officials decide that to save the city, they must construct a kind of urban fire guard, using Kelowna homes as material. Ironically, it is the fire itself that makes that unnecessary.
The winds were so strong that this fire was creating its own weather pattern. And Just when everything seemed the bleakest, when we thought we'd lost people, when we thought we were going to have to start bulldozing homes, we got rain.
Meanwhile, in Kamloops, tension rises as residents still wait for word on their homes. Word has leaked out that Lewis Creek is completely gone, but there has been no official confirmation, and there has been no news at all from Barriere.
Everybody thought Barriere had burned to the ground. The next morning, we rented a helicopter. You can see all the burned timber on both sides, and then it was almost like it miraculously split and went on each side of the town. A few homes and a few businesses were destroyed, but the town itself was still standing. So there was definitely a sense of relief.
Throughout the Mission subdivision, Hell Night has lived up to its name. By the time it is over, more than 220 homes are completely destroyed. Over the next few days, winds calm down enough for the fire department to regroup and establish control lines south and north of the city. But the fire continues to burn.
The final fire area of the Okanagan Mountain Park fire was about 25,000 hectares, which is about the same as about 70 times the area of Central Park.
Anxious residents gather at a church to find out the fate of their home.
The community, there was no anger. There was hurt, but there was no anger, not that we saw anyway. Everybody knew that we had done our best, and they showed that. And people who had lost everything, when they could reach out and say, you did the best you could, we appreciate that, we're behind you. That made it tolerable for us.
Murray Road and other residents of the Mission subdivision are taken by bus to view the damage firsthand.
There was just absolute feeling of disbelief because the whole neighborhood was absolutely destroyed. There wasn't even a wall standing in any of the houses. Nothing but smoldering ashes. It's unbelievable, but the cheap little umbrella that we had beside the pool was only lightly scorched. Yet the house was totally destroyed. And in front, the marigolds, which were only about 30 feet from the house, were as fresh and vibrant as ever. A house is a house, and I mean, that's where you live. That's where you cry and that's where you laugh. And it's that aspect of losing it that kind of cuts deep.
When Rob Rutten is finally allowed to return to Lewis Creek, he finds a war zone where his community once stood.
It was absolutely undescribable. The store was a mess, and because the siding was stucco, it didn't burn, of course, so it kind of imploded or collapsed on itself. All the stuff that was on shelves and everything was just now on the cement.
The destruction of the town's sawmill on the adjacent property is just as complete.
The lumber yard was almost 100% gone. All that was left was bands where the lumber piles used to be. The organic matter, the soil was gone. The sand was almost glazed from the extreme heat.
In a matter of minutes, more than 80 homes in Lewis Creek have been destroyed, along with the town's main source of employment. In October, they learn that the sawmill will not be rebuilt. 180 townspeople are out of work. Fires in the BC interior continue to burn for the rest of the summer. Cooler weather and autumn rainfall help distill some of the danger, and by mid-September, the state of emergency is lifted.
And even after the city was no longer in danger, the fire continued to burn. And in fact, they said would burn throughout the winter underneath the snow.
In the end, fire destroys over 260,000 hectares of British Columbia forest at an expense of $700 million. Miraculously, no one dies in any of the communities stricken by fire. The BC government commissions former Manitoba Premier Gary Filmon to review the province's response to the 2003 fires and provide recommendations for the following summer. The Filmon Commission releases 42 recommendations, and in April 2004, the province promises to implement all of them at an estimated cost of at least $25 million. With that cost comes a sense of hope for the future and a sense of pride and strength that continues to thrive in the community of Kelowna, British Columbia.
This town was just fantastic. Overnight, there are about, 1,000 volunteers, boom, setting up centers all over the city. And I've just never seen anything quite so moving.
Of the 65 homes that were destroyed, or properties that were destroyed, I think there's only 5 that are not rebuilding, five families. No, Lewis Creek will be better than before.
Are you prepared for a real natural disaster? Or just want to go on a camping trip and want some of the coolest new gadgets? We've got a whole range of products we've personally selected that you can find links to in the descriptions. Just by shopping through those links, you'll help support Bad Day HQ and help us create more great content for you guys.